Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming. Again, we've got quite a lot to get through this morning. Sarah's going to start off by showing you how to make a really simple bread. It's called fougasse. Do you want to tell us the history of it or whatever they know?
I can do what I'm needing.
Yeah, carry on. Yes.
So,
yes, indeed. Then we're going to do a fish pie, a couple of quiche. We're doing a cheese and ham quiche because we know Maggie doesn't like fish. And we're doing a salmon and broccoli quiche. We're going to do a fish pie, a couple of little twists in there, here and there. Hopefully we'll get some coleslaw to go with that, and then a steamed ginger and pear sponge pudding, which is delicious. So, there we go. Without further ado.
So this is a really basic sort of like white bread. It's about the simplest.
Just to get it parallel.
Yeah, it's just the most basic sort of bread. I would say if you're going to make this and put it in a bread tin to use as a sandwich loaf, I would put a tablespoon of olive oil or something in with it to make it softer. But this is just like a very fast bread that's just very quick to cook, only needs to rise once rather than twice.
That's strong flour?
Yes, so I've got 500 grams of strong flour.
What is strong flour?
It's higher in, it's got higher protein content. It would say
So, it should say bread flour.
it should say either bread flour or strong flour. So the protein in that, like the glutens, that we've been kind of, being gluten free, in bread flour would be maybe 12 or 13%, and in regular soft, just all-purpose flour, there would be about 8%. That's just plain. So there's nothing. So self-raising flour would have bicarb and glutathione and stuff like that added into it. This is just. I'm going to put the water in and start moving. So I've got easy baked yeast from Asda, which is now back on the shelves. Looks like that. So there's all kinds of things. If you don't do very much baking with yeast, there's all these really intimidating things about if you use fast action instant yeast or whatever, put it in warm water and wait for it to froth up and add a spoon of sugar and all the rest of it. This you just throw in. It's very hard to. Very hard to go wrong with it. But this is it's just fast instant. So put that in, salt it and stir around. And check the water. And then if you can put this in a food mixer, if you've got on with a dough hook, if you don't fancy the kneading. But if you're just doing a small amount, it's not that much, it's quite relaxed. But first of all you mix it to incorporate all the water, and then you need to kind of knead it a little bit more to start with, not that much, it's not that hard work, but the kneading will help. The gluten, the protein, is what makes it stretchy. So if you imagine it's like sort of very small, the protein plates are kind of like very small elastic bands, stretching, and that's what traps the carbon dioxide as the bread rises. So if you don't knead it enough to start with, you'll get kind of quite dense, heavy loaf. I think I might put a bit more water in this actually. Yeah, please. So it should start off being, is that one might be warm?
What more did you say?
Yeah,
Right? Sorry.
but the warm water's in the kitchen.
Yeah, one more in this house, didn't
Is it? Yeah. I didn't know that was connected to the other thing.
Just over his head.
Yeah, it's tempting to think if you use really really hot water, it will speed things up a lot, but if it's too hot, it will just kill the yeast. So, sort of like, I don't know, sort of body temperature, sort of like 37 degrees-ish, is what I'm doing. And you want to start off with something that's sort of quite sticky, and as the flour sticks it up, it should become smoother. I'm trying to do all this in the bowl to stop making a mess of doing this. I was thinking of the cleaning up.
Not take you long to clean it up.
But actually,
Better clear the decks here, there's going to be a lot of starting going on down there.
so you can probably see better if you take it out of the bowl. But it's just, it looks quite sort of like wet and shiny, and that's kind of pretty much nearly done. So it hasn't really taken long.
I got your bowl, don't worry, I'm not going to wash it up. I'm going to stand by.
It's going to need to go back in. But there's all kinds of ways of kneading. Everyone's got their own preferred method, and it really doesn't matter as long as you sort of stretch it. So what you're looking to is be able to kind of pull it a bit, and for it to stretch rather than tear. And then it's fine. So that's good. The really good, you know, if you've had a really bad day, that is some really good things to There's a really famous baker called Richard Bertinet in Bath. He's a French baker. He's got a famous cookery school. Yeah. And he's very keen on all of this. He's got some really good videos.
Put the flour in the sun and heating in every day. Doesn't matter, does it?
It's
It's just together quicker, but I don't think it's any different.
No, I think with the sort of, I mean, not just with the sort of like lockdown sourdough baking, but before that, there's such a lot of stuff on the internet that instead of sort of explaining bread making, tries to kind of make it sound very mystical, accurate for us. You do need to measure stuff, but bread is a lot more forgiving than cakes, I think. You know, eventually if you do it enough, you know when it looks right and when you poke it and when it feels right and when it's ready for the oven and something like that. But I think that's probably enough really. So we've done this first before everything else to give it time to rise, because there's nothing worse than time running out in the class and your bread dough is stubbornly sat there and then it's held on in the corner. But hopefully it's warm enough in here.
So that's for the warming
Right,
up,
right.
isn't it?
Yeah. And also the time of year will make a difference. So if you make bread in the summer on a really hot, humid day, it will double in size in no time. And if it's on a cold kitchen counter in December, the heating's not on.
In the porch.
Hot bread.
Yeah.
Hot bread.
Just I kind of, you know, you find yourself with a bowl covered in feel like following the sun around the house, or I put it in the greenhouse before, or and the hot bread is good. But just keep an eye on it. So there you go. You just want a smooth bowl dough.
Want flour?
No, yeah. I might have a bit of oil in it actually.
In the big one.
Just a bit of oil in here, just to get it right into. And you can cover it with a damp tea towel or a big plastic bag or whatever you like, just so that you don't want too much air to get all over the surface of it, because then it can form a skin on top and that will stop it rising so much. But that's pretty much all the mixing done, and then we're going to come up just before the end and shape it and cook it. So yeah, what we're going to turn this into, I think you've got a picture, is fougasse, which is, and fougasse comes from the same root as focaccia, from Latin word for half. So originally it was a bread that would be baked on a half after the fire had died down. because most people wouldn't have had ovens, so it's a quite pleasant thing.
Yeah, and the embers of the
It's
red
very
oven,
easy.
wasn't it? Yeah, and stuff like that.
Oh, beautiful.
Some places I think they have a communal oven, you know,
Yes.
a village or something, with big old bakery and whatever, it's at the end of the day. Or something,
That's
you
it.
know, bake their
That's
bread.
it.
That's exactly it.
So luckily it is really, really warm here.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and we've done things before in like very cold halls where I've had like you know, insulated picnic box with hot water bottle in the bottom, and blankets and towels around it to try and make it rise. But it's lovely. I think they've got them to play.
Straw box.
There's nothing like a hot press.
Yes, as long as you put something down first, otherwise it doesn't get fully clean.
Doesn't have anything anymore.
I'm baking this afternoon.
What are you making? For
I was
catching?
going to catch it
Brilliant. Okay, so usually if you make bread dough, it rises and then you knock it back, and that sort of redistributes all the air bubbles. Because this isn't going to rise a second time, basically just going to shape it and put it straight in the oven. Because it only needs to rise up a bit. I'm going to try and be very gentle and not knock any of the air out of it. There we go. So,
Also, to please John, I'm making porridge for
For a week.
Yeah.
Wow.
I forgot I can fill the boxes and put it in the fridge. Really not complex.
which porridge do you use?
Climate beds or whatever it is. Yeah.
So if you want to try
I've been using this for a long time now,
green
and
glass.
I put spices into it.
Well, now, is it you can make
For an ice bath, I
like a
really
loaf
use
bread?
Yeah.
You'd kind of like knock the air out of it and bits, and then roll it up in a shape. So that you've got sort of structure and you haven't got nothing, big air bubbles and,
This goes
you know,
into
when
a
you get bread
sauce
sometimes
of
sort of crumbles, it's sort of floating to one side and one
Pretty much what
side.
you did the first time, like get them turned over and punch it down and.
More just kind of like pat it down and then sort of shape it, but with this I'm going to try not to put it out too much. So this is going to make two little rows. I like to put it straight on the baking sheet. So you've got the baking sheet. Lots of flour. Or you could put ground semolina on your baking sheet, that will stop it sticking as well, like you do a pizza. And I'm just going to very, very gently sort of stretch them. So then it's really quite like if you make a pizza. But it will get really quite large. So it's being did on the baking sheet. But, yeah, the shape of these is traditionally supposed to be like an ear of corn or wheat or something. I'm not quite sure which. But what you do is, if you don't have a dough scraper, you could use a credit card, just whatever sort of spatula thing. But these are very, very cheap and very handy. Okay, it's going to make that. I'll line down the middle first and just kind of like stretch it out a bit. And then with the side of it, I'm going to do maybe 3 each side.
Big leaf.
Yeah, it's more like a leaf.
Yes.
And kind of open them out. This just makes it cook fast. And you can, I don't know, you could brush them with pesto before you cook it, that might be quite nice. Or you could mix seeds or pumpkin seeds or, yeah, whatever you like. Fennel seeds might be nice if you're having something with fennel in. But that's your sort of basic shape. Move it on. I'm hoping by then I'll put them in the oven. Excuse me, that's the timer or something. But it's probably something that's already out of the oven. I got it. Might be the quiche on the top right. So it's going to stretch it out into sort of a medium. So, it's in the middle.
Doesn't take long in the oven, does it?
It really doesn't. And the other thing that you can do so in there is you can sort of half cook them and freeze them, and then take them out and cook them from frozen. They take about 6, 7, 10 minutes depending on how frozen they are. Which is just what most supermarkets will do with bread you buy as freshly baked. So, but it saves time if you want to get all the rising and the kneading and everything done ahead. You can be as elaborate as you like in something, but Richard Burton always does this thing where he's got like little notches in the side as well, so it looks that would be like a good one. But it depends how many little crispy bits you want into. So there's that. They're going to go in the oven for about 12 minutes. And it's quite a nice thing to have if you've got, I don't know, just you want some sort of very quick French fries, like mop up juices of something, or and it's obviously not that much good for a sandwich, but it looks very impressive. It looks much. I like things that look a lot harder than they really are. So I'm going to squeeze those, and I've also got some that I made last night, half of it. I'll show you what they look like. So this is what I'm doing next. So if you cook them just enough so that you can sort of lift them off the baking sheet, but they're not kind of fully cooked, at that stage you can either freeze them or bring them out and put them into a hot oven afterwards to sort of finish off. Yeah, just so that you can do that. Oh, look, Kissy Red, how freshly made. I'm not being inspiring. But, right, I'll put these in first space.
Right, we're going to get on to some quiche. We need to, there's just a few things we need to do. We want to try and get the pastry into the blind first. You don't have to bake the pastry blind. If you've never baked pastry blind before, well, read on, here we go. But, I mean, if we were doing it at home, if we were having a quiche at home, half the time we wouldn't be bothered baking it blind. We'd just roll the pastry out, chuck the stuff in and stick it in the oven. If you're trying to sell it to somebody, if you want to impress somebody, you really do need to bake it blind, because the amount of people who say, oh, that quiche hasn't got a soggy bottom. You have to be able to look them in the eye and say, no, we baked it blind ourselves. This is pastry we made last night. We were going to buy the ready roll stuff, but and also the blocks of short pastry or whatever, but we couldn't see the blocks of pastry, and the ready roll stuff didn't look very good either, so we just thought we'd make some pastry, which is basically half the amount of fat to flour, a good pinch of salt, and some water to bind. So which, you can make it in a food processor or a mixer rather, if you want. Right, so we're going to make, we'll see how many quiche we get a chance to make here. We're going to make 2 salmon ones and a ham one. Right, so roughly that will do it. You'll have a bit left over. Draw a circle, a little bit bigger than your quiche tin because you want a bit of overhang. You can see where you're going. Here, roll out your quiche. Just keep on rotating your dough And the important thing is you want it to be level. You don't want, if you just roll in this place like that, you get a dip in the dough and a stick here, so it's all going to cook unevenly. So for that reason, you just need to rotate it and roll it. But ball some pastry, push it out to where you want to go. And you don't want it too thin, you want it quite thin. Sort of like that. That should be fine. So it's for sort of that sort of thickness there. Just have a wee look and see. Can't find any obvious bumps. The way to get the quiche in, just roll the pastry back and let it hang over. So you just have a bit at the back. Don't put your rolling pin on this because you'll only break the pastry. So you just do that, shuffle it along like that. And again, be patient, lift and tuck. If you push down now, you'll put your finger through that. So I'm using the knuckle, or whatever you want to call it. Just lift and tuck all the way around, like that. Now, ideally, you could let this pastry sit in the fridge for 20 minutes to rest because you've activated the gluten in it. Whenever it comes to heat, it's going to shrink. We haven't got time to let it rest, so we're going to let this little pastry hang over the side, which will compensate for that. What you can do is get a pair of scissors, which you have here somewhere. Here we are. And just, you don't want to waste all that pastry. If you spent the morning making pastry, you can always use these bits again, as long as you've got a bit of an overhang. Just. So whatever, the point is, whatever the pastry shrinks, it's slowly on the top of the quiche tin. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that means you don't have to put this. If I was doing, I have done before, I went through the whole rigmarole of, you make your pastry, you put your pastry in the fridge, and let it sit for an hour or two, the rest of the glutens, then you roll it out, let it sit for an hour or two, then you make it plain, etc., etc., etc. And it's a long, it can be a long old affair. So there's one.
What did you use in pastry?
Pardon?
What did you use in pastry?
What did we put in? We put dairy on.
Dairy manna.
Dairy manna, Chris.
I think on the recipes we've said ready rolled puff pastry, but when I looked at it, I couldn't bring myself to try it, so we're trying to get there.
Yeah.
Everybody's made it.
Some of the ones ready, not really, there's no butter in them or whatever.
No.
It's all of that palm oil, which is sort of.
No, that's right. Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, there is our orangutan friendly palm oil out there, you know, that aren't, you know, don't have issues. But palm oil is actually a very healthy oil. So like a coconut oil, it's actually very good. For a couple of chip shops used to run on palm oil all the time. But then we came along with the cheap vegetable oils, which I keep saying are killing everybody.
Do you grease the tins?
Yes, did grease the thing, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I've just done that before then to make it this.
Yes, indeed. Okay. We'll just zoom through this. We need to get another quiche out of that. Alright. Just have a wee smidge of the word. Yeah, I think if I was making pastry, the best pastry I still maintain is half butter and half lard, which is great, but you can't always get away with that. There's an awful lot of people, there's an awful lot of vegetarians around, and an awful lot of people balk at the idea of using lard. It's one of the most natural fats around.
Different chips in.
Completely. I still do, dripping. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's all those synthetic things. Which are horrible. There we go. Great. So now we need to break these down, and we're going to use baking beans. And baking beans are nothing. You can you can buy baking beans in posh food shops, which are little ceramic balls, or you can just use dried pulses like lentils or butter beans or something like that, which we have a whole stack of them. Whatever it is, we're not far away there. I might just let that go with me. A bit of pastry. So what we need to do as well here is to pick the bottom of this.
See, there's one here.
Okay.
It's in the middle.
It's okay. So just all over with a fork. And this just stops any air bubbles. If you don't do this, you get a great big sort of swell on your pastry. And just you give it a good old piercing.
Should you be, so do you take care of the bottom?
Not always. There's nothing worse. It's just insurance.
I'm always afraid of doing that, because like leaking, you know, underneath it.
It seals up, but what we can do, which, depending on what you're doing, egg white is very good. So
Yeah.
for some recipes, say you're separating eggs or whatever it is, or even a bit of beaten egg, it doesn't matter. Once you bake it the first time
Yeah.
with the bacon beans, take the bacon beans off, brush it with egg,
Yeah.
and that crisps it up even more, and then stick it back in the oven, sort of thing, you know what I mean?
That's it.
But these wee holes will seal up. They will actually seal up right there. So, right.
Maybe we need to practice if it's ready for it.
I would pick the pastry because there's going to be air trapped in there. Right, so a couple of these. Yeah, okay.
And you ready to cut paper grapes?
Oh, so Daisy.
Yeah, then
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just show you quickly how to do
I
this.
have ready for it.
Right.
Yeah, great.
Right. Fold it in half. Fold it in half again. So you've got a point. It's like making a paper jet. Fold it in a triangle. Another triangle. Another triangle. All the way till you get it. Take your quiche. This is the center point of the quiche. You want a bit of overhang there, so about there. Give it a crumple, so it'll fit. You open that up. Good for lining cake things as well. So you have a circle. And all it. Let me get a bit smaller this time. It fits better if you crumple it up. Alright, beans. I got it. These are just old card pushes is what they're called, that we've been using before. I can't bring myself to throw them away because there's nothing wrong with them.
They're a bit crusty after a while, don't they?
Pardon?
They're a bit crusty after a while.
Oh, they get a bit crusty, but they're only going back in the oven for 20 minutes to do it. Right. Okay, so these can go in for about 15 minutes. at about 180 or thereabouts. Right.
And the reason for baking sheet underneath it's not absolutely essential, but it's always a shame when you pick up a loose bottom tin and your fingers kind of if you just hold on to the baking sheet, it will.
Okay. Right, and now for the filling. Oops. Just get rid of that.
15 minutes.
15 should do it, thank you. Doesn't have to be cooked all the way through. I mean, if you're out to win a prize, you want to cook it till it's nice and crispy. Quick away. So I'm just going to poach the salmon in some milk and then use the milk that I poached the salmon in to make the custard that goes in the quiche. Simple, really. And there are sort of basic ratios which are very simple to use. Just good, worth remembering, roughly 4 eggs will set a pint of milk. And that's a 3/4 of a pint quiche tin. Obviously, depending on what's going in your filling, you may need more or less, you know. But, and you see quite a lot of people, or quite a lot of recipes sometimes that specify separating eggs. You will see a recipe that says 3 egg yolks and 3 whole eggs and stuff like that, which can be a bit confusing. But on that, if you have whole eggs, the whole thing is more voluminous because of the air in the egg whites. Whereas if you want a firmer, more set sort of egg custard, you'd separate your eggs. So if you were making a custard to stir and stuff like that, you would just use egg yolks. Okay, where are we? So I got some salmon from Asda. It's defrosted. It's not absolutely vital, but we want to just try to make sure I get this one right. That's it. No, that's it. That's the milk. So, just going to poach it in the milk. Going to sling a bay leaf in. And well, it's not the end of the world, we don't need a bay leaf. Put a bay leaf, just to help with a bit of flavour, completely optional. And put that on the heat over here. I'm going to let it come to the boil on a medium heat, then turn it off and cover it, and that will be fine. Right. Can I arm you with a lid? Whenever that looks like it's just come to the boil, you just turn it off and cover it, please. That would be super. Right. Right. For the filling. Leeks. I'm using leeks, part of the onion family. You could use onions if you wanted, scallions, whatever you wanted. Okay, but you're right. Use a great pig.
Why are you chopping like that?
Pardon?
Why are you chopping like that?
Sorry, I do that so we can get into the dirt in the middle. So you just leave a little bit there, run your knife down that way, run your knife down that way, and you can hold them under the top and do that, and you've got no grit in them. If you want to slice them in circles, do so by all means, but you need to stick them in a sink or a tub of water and let the tap run for a while, the grit will come out there. This is just quicker. Again, before I do that, let's get some butter on. So it's 2 times the recipe, by the way.
Yes, Martin's very fond of butter too, isn't it? James Martin, we put it in.
I think so, yeah, but he also uses things like rapeseed oil and stuff like that, which is poison. Well, it's near enough. You know. It's canola oil, well, canola oil and stuff like that. I've told you a rapeseed story 100 times, haven't I? It's the erucic acid rather, in it. Used to be cattle feed rape. Then they used it for biofuels. And then when they decided that the market was falling out of that they thought they'd maybe sell it to us in vegetable form. So they had to genetically modify it. They had to get rid of the smell. They had to get rid of the acid. It used to be cattle, but they had to do
I thought it was pure. I thought it was pure.
Well, it might well be, but it is genetically modified now.
Right, okay.
I think it's banned in France. You can't use it yourself. Absolutely.
Wow.
And the commercial brand is canola oil. Have you heard of canola oil?
No.
Canola, you see it quite a lot, and it's in Canada, one of the biggest producers of rapeseed, and it means Canadian oil, low acid. That's what it's an acronym, canola. But yeah, I wouldn't. I just don't even like the smell of it.
I mean,
Well, that's right. I mean, the yellow thing, you know, the yellow thing. But it's one of those things like they're selling, you know, they're trying to sell it to us in the way that they sold Florida to us. And all was polyunsaturated. They said, oh, we shouldn't be having butter, we should be having polyunsaturated, we shouldn't be having eggs because of the cholesterol. And then you think, well, hold on, who's telling me that? And why are they telling me that? And the science is against that. I mean, when you dig into it deeper, and you know, people who actually know what they're talking about, you realise what they're doing. So, I mean, an awful lot of rapeseed producers are very genuine people, but I don't think they fully understand the implications. Okay, so I'm going to add some fennel seeds to this. So make your own decision. Fish and fennel go very well, leeks and fennel go very well. You could add some sliced fennel if you wanted instead. Just going to let them come up and sweat away for a little bit. Okay, I'm going to add a pinch of salt, a pinch of pepper at this point. How's that salmon doing? Is it getting there?
Yeah. Just
Sort of late. Okay. Just clear some up. I've got a couple of herbs which are optional here we can use. We could use dill, we could use parsley, both. You could use chives, you could use whatever herbs are growing in the garden, really, to be perfectly fine. How's that doing? That's turned off. Great. That's it. That's good. That's the main thing. The fish has come to the boil, turned off, you just need to let it sit for a few minutes. We don't want to overcook it at this stage. And then I'm going to lift it out, take it off take the skin off it. And let it sample. What's those quiche things? How do I taste those? Yeah, just a couple of minutes on the quiche things. Right, the timing's all over the place. Terrible, isn't it? Whenever you do this, whenever you work this out, you think, well, that's going to be in there for 15 minutes. That will take about 10 minutes because I'll have time to do this, I'll have time to do that. 9 times out of 10 it works, and then sometimes you think, right, you've got 3 minutes to kill. So if anybody's got a song and dance or a story to tell.
So what are we going to use for quiche?
Right. Well, I'm just doing a really basic one. The cheese and ham one, which I think is wonderful. You can use all types of fish. You can use crab and sweet corn, which is nice. Again, using the standard custard. If you substitute some of your milk for cream, that makes it even richer. What else? Cheese and asparagus. You use blue cheese and broccoli, things like that. So that, there's loads and loads and loads of options.
Anything that's not too watery. Anything not too watery. Right,
Okay.
back in the day you get like the slices of tomato in quiche, whatever, and as they cook, so much water comes out that the whole thing is so it's not got buggery and everything when it comes out. So if you've got something that's going to give off lots of water as it cooks, cook it first before you put it in with the other fillings in the oven. Yes, definitely.
Right. Okay, so we'll get some egg custard ready. So for the salmon quiche, as I say, it's roughly a 3 egg, 3/4 of a pint of milk for each quiche. As we're doing the ham one as well, I'm going to crack a total of 9 eggs. And then we'll, hold on, I'm going to do 6 into one bowl. And then,
The little one.
I've got milk and cream for one, but I haven't got for the small one, so yeah, we just use that, that's good. We're getting short on the rescue eggs. We're getting more tomorrow. We've got 10, I think we're going to use for the pudding or something like that. We'll be happy to actually get these. Which breaks your heart having to buy eggs and pudding. As long as they're free range, I don't mind. I mean, it's nice. There's a place at Keel Point that has an honesty box. It does. Do you know what Keel Point is? You know, if you go into Dundrum before you come out onto the Newcastle Road, there's a road that goes up to your left on the promenade. It's like sort of just up there. I think you can park up there. You can park up there, but there are free range eggs for sale up there in the honesty box. You put a pound in the box, take your eggs out, and yeah, if there's
Maybe you get 6.
you get half a dozen for 6. Half a dozen for 6. But I think in recent months there's been a spate of break-ins, do you know what I mean? Because it's quite secluded. So you get some of the boys will go up there and pull all the thing up. Or that's ridiculous, you know. I don't know. But they have, I don't know, it's like 30 or 40 boxes of eggs in there, so I suppose it's 30 or 40 quid, you know. That's the 6, so I'm going to need to put those in there. Right, this is for the salmon, and this is for the ham. Right. All will become clear. Don't know if you can smell the leeks.
Yeah.
You get the fennel in there, a little bit of aniseed off it, which is absolutely lovely. Okay, back on the side. I think we'll declare these cooked. There we go. So, before we do that, let's fish out the salmon. chopping board. Lovely. So some of the salmon came from pie mix, little bits like that, and you can see they're just nicely cooked at the moment. The bigger bits were all our fillets, so I'm going to scrape the skin off of those. It's a good idea if you've got fish fillets with skin on, cook them with the fillets on because you get more flavour on them. So just peel it back. Take too much of it. Obviously, check for bones, just in case, but there shouldn't be any. Okay.
These would freeze up more, wouldn't they?
The quiche? Oh, it certainly would. Yes. Yes, you're not the only thing. We don't know what's going to happen at Christmas, but do we? We don't really know.
Well, I said a bit February with family come over.
That,
Middle of the night, but
well,
you have to be prepared.
depending on vaccinations and whatever, and all that. I'm getting a flight over there, it's hard to get as well, isn't it? Oh, they're booked already?
But they have to delay another way.
Yes. Okay. Yes, please.
So the pastry pieces have all come out of the oven now, so they're still about halfway cooked. I'm just going to take the beans out and trim the edges at this stage, if they're cooked enough so that they won't shrink anymore once the filling's in. And if you try and do it after you cook the whole thing, you end up with all kind of pastry crumbs
Yeah.
and sandwiches and
Lovely. That's all right.
this is the deep
Birds like these bits, I'll tell you.
I was just going to say, he gets the coffee.
Absolutely.
Birds.
songs.
But if you're making sweet pastry, that's even nicer because it's like shortbread that comes out. Right. So basically, look, we've got quiche which is mainly cooked. You could stick this back in the oven for another 5 minutes to get really, really crispy. I haven't really got the time to do that. So if you're in that mood, do it. Okay.
You can start on pastry delay over as well.
I would. Either that. If you like your paste, if you roll it out And say trimming, say it was raw now and we have to use it. What you can do is just stick it in the fridge or stick it in the freezer. Stick the whole thing in the freezer to get really cold, let it rest, and then stick it in the oven. And generally speaking, you wouldn't need the bacon beans even. Because what happens is if your oven isn't hot enough, the fat just melts. If you know what I mean, and the pastry that runs down the side. As long as it's rested, it's less likely to shrink as well. So when you stress the gluten in it, you have to let it rest in between. So that overhang thing just compensates. And the other thing is, whenever you take this out and you break it, say you're cutting the side off and there's a great big crack or a fissure in it, you just get some of your raw pastry that you've got left over and fill it up like puppy. Just block it up, you know, like whatever it is. Okay, so for this, first thing we'll do is we'll put some of this on the bottom, the lake stuff. What?
I think I could just internalize it next one.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have done the previous 2 weeks. We've bought the pastry, straightforward. But I think it never hurts to.
Just for
So I think even if you buy your pastry, you're not going to be any further down the road. If you think about it, really, you're still going to have to line your tin. You're still going to have to grease your tin, line your tin, cook it blind if you want it blind, you know. When I say blind just maybe sort of guarantees you a fuller. Because what if you just have raw pastry, pour your eggs and your milk in, it's harder for the pastry to crisp up and cook all the way through.
so you have to actually do a chocolate and have to line.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, you know, it's not the end of the world if you don't put it in. Right. Salmon, we'll just flake over. I would always try and add a little bit of smoked salmon in here, smoked salmon trimmings. Couldn't find any yesterday. So you can put whatever you want in, really. Put a lot of salmon, not that much cheese, so there you go. They're not today. Chunks. And then we got some broccoli to go in as well. So broccoli, I just blanched it up earlier for about 2 minutes. And then we've got quite a lot of broccoli. This is just one head of broccoli. But I'm using the stalk as well. Peel the stalk. We just trim off the sort of fibres outside, either with a peeler or a knife, and slice it up. And it's really, really delicious.
I can see watching something the other day, and somebody was cooking with broccoli, and they cut the stalks off, but they didn't use the rest, so it's like, I don't know, that's waste. And I'm like,
I know. It's like so that's probably enough for the time being. In there, we don't want to necessarily really. And this is another thing you see with celebrity chefs as well, or is it just me? But whenever they say they're doing I don't know, they're making a steak or a roast or something like that, you know, and they're only going to serve one. 3/4 of it gets wasted, doesn't it? Sort of thing. They slice the end off and set that aside so they have 2 centre cuts and all. Who's going to do that in real life, you know? Okay.
I'll get a tickle with them.
I think so. Yeah, well, exactly. The camera crew come around. So here's the note now. It's not boiling anymore. It's this milk I poached the salmon in. We pour that in. Put that out of the way. Sarah's do. You get a whisk. There we are. And we'll add the cream. Just a little bit of cream. And a daisy. 2 teaspoons. It's not much. And then you've got your herbs options now. So what should we have? Some Bill? Just let me choose now. I'll do Bill. Bill is very good fish. I'll do one with dill and one with parsley. How's that? Take any big stalks off. Chop some top, just break it down and then do that bit again. That's fine, but that can be the other one. Or chives, you could use different chives in the fish pie, but you can put all these things in the fish pie, so it really matter. Okay, that's all we need to do now. Make sure it's well mixed. Here's bacon sheets actually. Oh, how close was that? Haven't for years. I got them with an oven I bought in Bristol. It was a commercial oven. Sort of flushish.
Would you use a base of a bigger plant, a bigger one?
Oh, you could for sure. Well, I think we have an extra plant thing somewhere, so I'm tempted. Right, could you do the necessary in the oven, please? In the door. Right. So I can't use that for a ham plan because it's got fish in it. So here's the ham one. And this is very, very easy, it's just straightforward. Very, very simple. Lots of cheddar. Again, the stronger the cheese you use, the more gravy you'll get. You could use some mustard in with that, in with the eggs and the stuff. That would give you a deeper flavour. Mustard and cheese work well together. So I've just got some ham here. With a little chopping board. Chop that ham off. As much or as little as you want. These are little soft cuts. You go by that. And then you get a big box of it for a couple of quid. They're quite chunky as well. So we'll put some. Right, I'll stick it over there. There we go. And then you've got options again now. You could put some chives in with that, or a bit of parsley. You can put a couple of slices of tomato on top of that. But the tomato sometimes adds a little bit of moisture to the egg custard and dilutes it a bit, so you just need to be careful not really salty tomatoes. Some dried tomatoes may go well. But instead of ham, you could put in chorizo, and you could use manchego cheese, anything like that, olives, things like that. There's some chives. Right. So 4 3/4 of a pint, really. Is that the pint or the litre? I need to get that right, I see. There it is. Thank you, salt. Thank you, pepper. Get the salmon on it. And of course there'll be too much egg custard for this now. It might just be a bit right. Okay. Right, Quiche are in. Anybody got any questions on that one? Is that reasonably clear? All right.
So the quantities I've got here are 3 times the recipe that you've got, because there's more of this, obviously. So I cooked some of the pears earlier on, so I can fit them all in one small frying pan. So I've got, I'm starting with melted butter and brown sugar. And you're just making sort of like a very, very rough sort of caramel something, which is going to be on the bottom of that. We're putting a sort of curly pears, and then the sponge is going to soak into it. That's looking lovely.
What are we making now, Sarah?
We're making pear and ginger sponge pudding.
On the one back.
Yeah, I think it's on the page.
You have a wee snooze? You have a wee snooze?
No, that was good.
It's on the very back there. There you go.
So you can see that the sugar and the butter is just sort of melted, not completely, but just so it's a sort of golden colour. Don't let it to burn because that's good. And the pears have just been peeled and quartered, and obviously the stalks off. But this is a good thing to do with pears. It's very, very hard to buy a ripe pear anywhere, even the ones that say ripe and ready to eat, or get them home and actually it's like an apple, you know. So this deals with that problem really, but there are loads of them around at the minute. These are, I think these were a special offer in Lidl this week. But they're just sort of conference pears, I think.
Those firm, very firm cooked.
Yes, but I mean, soft will be fine. I mean, I suppose if you had a perfect pear, you just eat it, but so often you buy them and they're really hard and they're sort of sat in a fruit bowl and then all of a sudden have sort of flies and it's too late.
Something really ripen. Yeah, that's right. They ripen apparently from the inside out. Yeah, they've got apparently.
And they go black.
They ripen very quickly. I think you cook it all the time.
If you cook them, you don't have to wait. So we're just going to stew them with butter and sugar for a bit, and then I've got some stem ginger that I'm going to add at the end. So you could also use crystallized ginger, you know, the kind that you find it's much harder, and you find it on the sort of dried fruit area in the supermarket. That's kind of a lot sweeter, but if you kind of slice that thinly, you know, if this is how it's going, that would be a good substitute as well. So I'm going to see if I can manage not to burn those. Right. So they won't cook completely, but they'll soften a little bit. And I think I said in the recipe, if you haven't got fresh pears, I'm sure you could do this with tinned pears. Obviously that would be a lot softer. And you would hardly need to kind of cook them in the butter and sugar at all, because they'd be quite sweet. So the sponge. Now this looks a lot, but it's 3 times the recipe, so that's fine. I suppose if I was much fitter than I am, I could do this the old-fashioned way, just with a wooden spoon. I can remember my nan making cakes. She wouldn't obviously have an electric mixer, but that would just be like she would clean everything with a wooden spoon. Or later on one of those ones that with 2 whisks and you turn the handle.
Yeah.
But actually it's quite warm, so this is quite soft, so it might work. So I might need to vanish into the kitchen to plug in things. It's very fine. There you go, so just do it like that. So you could use your electric whisk or a food mixer if you want to. So this is the self-raising flour, 3 times recipe, and a couple of spoons of baking powder. I've also put a little bit of ground ginger in, just to make it extra gingery. But like grated orange zest would be very nice in here as well. Or maybe cardamom instead of ginger. Oh, that was a bit dry. That was the egg. Right, so what you're meant to do is cream butter margarine and then add the eggs gradually and then whisk it and fold in your flour. But actually I think it probably won't make any difference. If you've got self-raising flour, it makes up for a lot. Actually, if you can see, even though I've done everything in completely wrong order, it's still kind of like quite light and airy, just because we're using self-raising flour. So all the things about how you meant to sift everything and fold it in with a big baking spoon very carefully. You know, you really do need to do that sometimes, but lots more recipes are quite forgiving.
Did you have the milk in the one with your eggs? Did you have the milk in the one with your eggs?
I haven't added any milk yet. I'm going to see what it's like. So it's like, what was it we were doing last week with the cheese pastry? dropping consistency. So you mix everything in first and then see, because these eggs are a bit variable in size as well, so they're not exact. But, yeah, so that's a bit firm. I'm going to put a bit of milk in at this stage. It's firm dropping consistency.
You could use a whisk for this, or
Absolutely. Or you could just throw it all in your food mixer and press the button and done. That will do the same thing. Yeah, it's purely because I've forgotten to plug in the extension lead. And because we're being...
What extension lead do you want?
Yes, I know, but I forgot to plug it in earlier.
Fine.
So then if I run off to the kitchen, the viewers at home,
Yes.
whoever they might be, wouldn't realise where I'd gone or what I was
So
doing.
now we're on TV.
Oh, it's terrifying. There you go. So I would say this is more like...
Next thing we will be able to make it.
So I turned it off because I was starting to smell a little bit of scorching there. So this is the slice. I think that there's probably about 3 pieces of stem ginger there, just very finely sliced. You can leave it out if you don't like it, or if you can use it, it doesn't matter. But, this somewhere I've got another dish.
I'll be lost.
You haven't
no,
got
that's
another
the
dish.
sugar there.
On the queues here.
The sesame seeds,
I know what it is.
Want that wash?
So the pears are just going to go very good to the dish. There's the ginger and all this. I'm just going to spread the sponge mixture over the top. So the thing to do is sort of put little dollops of it all over the place, and then if there's gaps, you can use a knife to join them up. That's it.
That's another thing I care about for showing on the TV, if they're scraping something out of the bowl, they can't put it in the bowl.
Oh, I know.
I'd be back in there scraping every last bit out.
But I suppose when you see people doing things on television, they've got, it's like Blue Peter, isn't it? They've got like 17 versions that they prepared earlier, or somebody else prepared earlier. That they can just go. Yes, more back here. Oh no, I'm trying to not even in the bowl. So what you want to do is just, the only thing you very gently make sure that the edges are sort of sealed, so that as it's cooking, the filling underneath doesn't sort of bubble up and end up on the bottom of your oven. Because it's horrible to clean. So there's those. No, that's and they're going to go in the oven for whatever it says on the restaurant. Is it about 40 minutes? Yeah. So just until the sponge is sort of golden brown, and you should see bits of the stuff underneath bubbling up.
Doing done. Time for a fish pie. Right. Okay. So I'm just using supermarket fish pie mix, which you can get it in any supermarket now, I think. Possibly not loads. They were on offer. I think it's 2 for £6 or something like that, or 5 or something like that.
What is that in Vegas?
This might be in Tesco's or Asda, actually. No. Asda. Roll that. There you go.
Is it 3 for?
I think you get 2 for £6, and then it'll be £3.50 each or something like that. She's using cooking for frozen. I've fished the salmon out of this one to go in the salmon quiche, along with some of the fillets, if you're wondering why it's a bit shiny on the salmon. So it's, without reading the label, I would say it's salmon, haddock, cod, probably pollock or whiting. And that's fine. That's what we need. And if you want to up it a wee bit, you could stick some prawns in and stuff like that if you wanted. But no, it's not what you need. Sure. Okay. So this is 3 times the amount of your recipe. So yeah, I'm just going to poach it in this now. Oh, look at the dye coming out of that. And again, I'm just going to bring it to the boil. When it starts to bubble, I'm going to turn it off. Stick a lid on it, and you're away. You have the big lid on. Here we are. You're on lookout, John, if that's all right. Right, so for the filling, we're using onions and celery. You could use leeks and celery. You could use onions and mushrooms. You could use whatever you wanted, but you need a bit of onion in there.
You can buy it already chopped.
You can buy them ready chopped. Go on, just chop them. I'm just going to chop a couple of bay leaves and a clove in the water with a milk as well. Up to you entirely. Just their flavour. I'll fish out the clove and the bay leaves before I make the sauce. But the clove is always good for making a white sauce. You ever do that thing where you get an onion and stick a bay leaf on it and clove? Fruit day, onion fruit. Okay. This is just a bit of there now. Right. Butter in the pan. I want to melt. So we'll get our eggs in there. See, I can't prepare. I can't think ahead. So as big or as small as you like. Again, you chop the onion just up to about there, and that's the scope. Use your finger as a guide. pull it away so it's still held together by here. Turn it around sideways. Angle your knife slightly down to avoid your fingers, and also to get for the root. There's two, that's plenty. So we're going that way, and now we're going across the way. Doesn't have to be too bad, too small. Small or as big as you like it. Don't want to waste the oil cuts. So. Yeah, right. Things not getting cut for the rest of the year, okay? You cut your grass? Stay here? Who's not going to make it? Our neighbour does the hedge and everything. Really?
The grass doesn't grow above 7 degrees, or below 7 degrees.
Was that right at 15?
Oh, well, Thursday won't be a good day to do it, huh? I think Thursday is dropping by 8 degrees or something like that, isn't it? Ah, yeah, there you go. One more. Onions and celery, which just happen to have some ready washed. Big or small as you like. That's a different action, that's the action when you keep the knife tip on the table all the time. And you use the back of your knife. See it again. So that's the action. Again, use your finger. Move your finger back, but slide. Don't lift your hand off. Just move your finger back.
Keep looking.
Well, keep looking. You can you don't have to look. You do it with touch. Okay. Okay. Let's take a lid on that now and just let it swap a little bit. See our glass lid in there. I don't have on this one. Right, we'll let that pick away merrily there. A bit of a light. So the fish is on. So now I'm going to get the potatoes ready while we're waiting for the fish to poach. No, we didn't actually vote. You ever use one of these things here, the racer? They're brilliant. One of those things is the racer. They're great things for you guaranteed mashed potatoes, really. Oh, there's nothing wrong with a masher. It's called a masher. Depends on how much you're making, really. This is potato bread, really. Right? But, so you don't get any lumps in that sort of thing.
Just makes it nice and put out.
Alright. You can serve these as potatoes the way they are, snow potatoes. You occasionally get people want these. Home de terre à la ménage sort of things are for people who can't have any fat or anything like that. They want something light. Yes. Looks quite pretty actually. A little bit of gravy around it.
You have cheese.
Give me the butter and the fat, everything.
No. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to see the potatoes on there with butter. Yeah.
And salt and an egg in the middle.
Lovely, yes, indeed. Raw egg, and use of egg, isn't it? Crack the egg out into the sponge, or whatever it was. Oh, agreement. Do you ever hear of a thing? I'll tell you what it is. There's a book called Ireland's Green Harvest. It's a really good book. I can't remember the life who read it. But Richard Corrigan, you heard of Richard Corrigan?
Yeah.
He's into it. He reads it and endorsed it and whatever the hell. But it's a really good read. It's traditional, long-forgotten foods and history of food on this island. And they're just talking about spuds. Did you realise that at one point the average Irish bloke before the famine ate over 4 kilos of spuds a day? 4 kilos of spuds a day. It was because of the landlord system and the likelihood of them getting thrown off the land just like that, at the whim of the landlord. It wasn't in their interest to go anything other than high energy food, cheap high energy food to feed them and the family. And the one thing that would do that would be spud. Once we got it from America, prior to that, it was oat bread really and stuff like that. You know, we didn't really start relying on soda bread until after the famine. But apparently people would cultivate what they called a potato meal. So you would boil up the spuds, chuck them on the table in their jackets. Couldn't afford knives. So everybody had, not everybody, but it wasn't uncommon to see somebody would grow an extra long thumbnail for scraping the potatoes. So it's the first I heard of it from a reliable source. So there you are now. Well, yes, I mean, it's fascinating stuff.
This is the old man, you know, we would buy in the house, we get the tea, and you pour it into the saucer, and then they...
Oh, I know.
It's disgusting.
When I was small, the lady next door to us, you know those white pudding bowls,
What?
the blue and white pudding bowls.
Yeah.
She drank her tea out of the road.
Yeah.
Not a cup, and a teacup was never
Aye, always on.
all
Stewed.
I was stewed.
I was stand on it.
If I put some cheese in here along with some butter.
And scallion.
Yeah, scallions.
Spring onion.
Spring onion indeed. I mean, in England, you phone up from a restaurant and say, I'll have, 3 bags of scallions.
And in America, there's one called scallions.
Oh, they do indeed, yeah. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. You have the spring onions.
See, I heard there a couple of weeks ago, old scallion, oh, that's the old-fashioned word for spring onion.
Oh.
And I thought,
I don't think so. So you want to add your cheese and your butter when the spuds are hot, obviously, because the cheese will melt in. The butter will melt in. You can always let it down with a little bit of milk if you want. Plenty of seasoning here, just not mess around. You need a little salt in there. I'm a white pepper man for spuds. Would you say the same? Yeah. I mean, there are times when you could talk to him, but we never saw black pepper. I'm sure none of you did. It was always that or whatever it was, But I like it.
And I always used to salt and pepper our dinner before we got it.
Is it? So, and was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad thing, because I didn't like white pepper.
All right, could you not say just don't put any pepper on
No,
it?
just everybody got the same.
It's just one, it's all the one shape, it's one long bits.
There we are here. Very near it. We'll just let it go for a wee minute more. Right. Oh, there's missing some change in there as well. Or actually, I'll pick. Where I said I was going to put on the Australians. Or cherries, I'll pick that. I'll put these. Good job. These are cherries from our garden this morning. They're a bit tired, but they were quite prim this morning. Thank you. Right. Hold on a sec for a second. No problem. I hope you all like fish. See what we can do with this. Be smart. We had a bit of an accident. So I told John's fault. He was talking to the back of the class. Right. Okay. What are we going to say? Right, okay. We're at that. Okay. We're okay for time. We've got time. Right, sauce. Here we are. Onions and celery or salt. So I'm going to put 3 times the amount of flour in, 120 grams or whatever it is, which is a roux. And I'm going to just cook that out. I want to let that cook for a couple of minutes to get the rawness out of the flour, just to take the nuttiness on. So I need to strain that fish into the bowl. I want to have a sink over there, if you don't mind. So that's now I'm also going to have a stock cube in here. Really? You don't have to if you don't want to. Chicken stock cube. We'll just, chicken is a very good thing to use with fish. Chicken stock is very good. If you haven't got a fish stock cube, chicken works well. Works well with anything. Okay. All right. And then I'll get Joe. We almost know what we're doing here. Right. So here's the poached milk. We've got a roux. Just going to pour this on. Not too much to start with. And what happens is you get a bubbling, lumpy effect like that. Do not worry. Just keep on stirring and it goes smooth. It absorbs all the milk that we put in. Bit more. You like that smell? It's good, isn't it? That's nice. You're a fish man, Sam. Do you like a bit of fish? Do you like fish?
Oh, yeah.
You do. Yes. Yes, apparently the trawlers, according to, I don't know if you know Hugh Bonham, who does the fish down, and he does it in Ballinhinch Market and Newcastle, down around there. He's got a wee fish trailer, he sells fish. Good, really good quality fish. But he was saying that apparently the trawlers, he gets most of his fish from Kilkeel or Glass. And they're getting paid something like 10 grand a week to stay in harbour because of the lockdown stuff. So he was getting all his fish from Peterhead and Scott, which is bizarre, Here we are. That as well.
The Scottish boats are still coming up.
I believe so.
Is the fish in there, so Ben?
Pardon?
Is the fish in there, so Ben?
No, the fish is over there. It's been drained. It's just come out that I poached the fish in,
Yeah.
along with the original onions and celery, cooked in butter, thickened with flour.
And then are you going to add the fish to that?
Yeah, I'm going to put the fish in the tin and in the dishes and pour this over the fish. So at this point you can add whatever you want. I'm just make that come to the boil. There we are. We got a nice smooth fish sauce with a few bits in it. So I'll be nice and clean just for luck. Some peas, why not? I'm just thinking, good idea. Rather than waste this broccoli, should we slam that in? Why not? Well, it seems a shame to waste it, doesn't it? Right. Okay. A little bit more of that. Bit of salt.
Have you tasted that at any stage, Richard?
No, I haven't tasted it at any stage. It goes in, I taste all the time, but it's just so hard to do. That's it. I've got these plastics. There we are. Right. Excuse me. You wouldn't like that. That's fine.
Wow.
Yep. Now, if it's too rich for you, I'll just squeeze a lemon. I don't think it needs it. I don't think it needs anything at all. I think it's good to go. So we'll. Because everything's hot, this will only take a few minutes to go off. I'm not seeing.
What is it, you reckon?
I know a thigh dish.
A thigh dish?
One, two.
Which two? Two.
Oh,
Three.
Where's it? Oh, hidden. Right, six nine. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Hey, what wouldn't mind for example slice the eggs? Just on the top there. Alright, ditch the bay leaf and a clove. Anything else you see? That's fine. a label as well.
I know.
Right.
Off you go.
Here, was there somewhere?
What are the eggs for?
The eggs, you can put the sliced eggs on top. Well, you can put them on now if you want, and then put the sauce on. Optional, but it's quite it's a really nice thing to put on it. Yeah, there you go.
Good picture,
Okay.
Or you could just
Just set it on top if you want. I'll do one paper and I'll do one setting on top.
Is it practice really with those things?
For these? Yeah, very much so.
I know, really. You see, I can never get, I tried doing that, but I can never get the nozzle on.
The nozzle's in the bottom, the nozzle in.
Sorry.
Put the nozzle in first.
Why is it?
Put the nozzle in first.
It's no good. Oh dear. I'm going to get
What's the camera? That's what it's there. The camera.
Oh, but you shouldn't have reminded me of camera.
Especially, I think you're not.
I'll only start messing things up when you told me.
So you do something a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So take any air bubbles out, called burping it, apparently. There's your thing. When you use this is just used for guiding. This is what you do. You twist it down, and it's pressure from this hand that produces it. So if I pipe this out, you can either just do a blob like that. I'm using this hand, yeah, or you can do swirls like that. Just keep twisting it up. And obviously keep an eye on your spuds to make sure you've got enough. It's a good idea to start at the other end as well. Okay. A little bit more.
That's not mine, you know.
No, I think it's a taller one. I think it was about this for 20, 30 years, something like that.
easy clean.
Yeah, just run them under a tap, turn them inside out. And they've got a wee hook on them, you just hang them up to dry. Or... With the disposable ones, they always burst on me. So that's just a very simple sort of design, like that. So there's one ready for the oven. This one, I'll just, if you haven't got a paper bag, not to worry. I'll do for the time being.
You can really do that for sausage.
Very good.
That's good.
You just set it on.
Well,
A little bit.
an ice cream scoop.
Ice cream scoop might do it, yes indeed.
That's fine.
Now there's probably a wee bit too much sauce and filling in here. It'll get a little drip, so you might want to put this on a baking tray. And then what we'll do, that's probably enough. Just get a palette knife and just wet it slightly. Smooth your potatoes out. Now you've got options now. You can either, with a fork, you can just rough it up like you would a shepherd's pie, or you can do sort of like fish scales. If you want to do that, you just get, tip of a spoon will do it just as well. Just that all the way. It's not very tight in some of the grains, so we're not going to rush here. You get a nice creamy mash. You'll leave a much finer sort of indentation on. But you need the little ridges on this so that they pick up and they catch. And you get a bit of colour on them. If it's dead smooth, it's no good. Right. So we slam that in the oven too, but I've put it on a baking sheet. Anything you want goes in here. We're not going to need all of that. That'll be plenty. We've got some cabbage we shredded earlier. We thought we can either do that or bring all the robo cows and the food processors and things in to do it. Just so that we respect it now. If you want to slice it by hand, then to do this. You've got the root on that. Just take
What's in the bowl, Richard?
pardon? Shredded cabbage. Shredded cabbage already, because I didn't want to bore you all by showing you. Just watching me shred cabbage for 20 minutes. You know. So, it's exactly the same thing you do to the white cabbage. Nice and thin. If you have a food processor, it's probably not a bad time to employ it. But we keep up, we've got 2 or 3 sheds out the back, you know, sort of, we keep a lot of our catering equipment out there. And, things every time you want something big, gotta go out the shed and get it, so just find yourself using your knife half the time. Right, I'm going to use just the 1 carrot, I think will be enough. And anything you want at all can go into this. I think I heard you say red cabbage is lovely. Sprouts, raw sprouts, soon we sprout time.
Yeah, lovely garden.
You have, do you?
I haven't before, fantastic.
Right?
And they're not better.
No. The sprout tops are the trendy one now, aren't they? Pardon?
Tree one.
Yes, they were the ones,
Yeah, you
yes.
can buy them actually on the store.
You can, yeah, that's quite cheap anyway, but it's not very cost effective way to buy them.
But you can keep growing.
You're paying, well, you know, you're paying for the weight of stock.
Keep growing, keep growing. You know, maybe keep going.
In the farm shop, just so you can keep the leg. You wouldn't really pay much more or less.
Right.
Just charged by
Soft. Yeah.
Oh, that's the way I know you are.
more than a few years, to be honest with you,
Yeah, I think
because,
so.
yeah, and you get home and you say,
So, it's good. Feel.
Yes, they're very, very good for you.
And then plants, and he's also got cauliflower as well. We don't come out and okay, right. They even shafted. Yeah, that's it. Pick them when they're small, you know, they're lovely to close the center. The little tiny carrots, you can buy in the place.
I think we'll have a bit of celery in there, a couple of scallions, if you do it. Just not too much celery. Celery salt's a really good thing for these. If you have some, it's very, very flavors.
you don't use ordinary raw onion or anything?
Can do, up to you entirely. I think, I like raw onion at times. I think quite a lot of places, see, people like their onions here a lot more than they do in the mainland, in England. I think, absolutely. No, it's not, in general it is. you don't see many people dicing onions small over here, is what I mean. So people like their onions. So, but make your own mind up on them.
With the coleslaw, you would shred them, just like carrot basically.
You could shred them, but if you soak them in a wee bit of vinegar, a little bit of wine vinegar, and then pour that vinegar into your dressing. I mean, if I was making, red onions are good for that as well. Just a little splash of red wine vinegar. And slice them. Pardon? 20 minutes when you shred them. 15, 20 minutes. Takes the sharpness and the rawness out of it. A little bit of wine vinegar.
White wine vinegar. Is that sorry whenever they're cut up first?
Slice them up and just stick them in a teaspoon or two of white wine vinegar. And then you can always pour that white wine vinegar into your mayonnaise or whatever. I mean, a lot of places would use salad cream to dress their coleslaw because there's acidity into it, there's a tang, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
But you make your own mind up for that, you know. Okay, celery, we'll add that. Of course, you could put apple in as well if you wanted.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
Would you? And walnuts and all that stuff.
Well, I used to make it for the kids, you know, when they were home from school and stuff like that, because I was away for school during the week. And then I never had any confidence in what they had. So, lots of, raw vegetables, I thought it was good.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's just a very basic sort of vegetable mix, you know. Anything you want goes in there. Grated celeriac, anything like that, even sweet or turnip, you could put that in. And so that, if you're mixing, you want to make sure you stuff up before you add the dressing. It becomes very hard to mix, you know what I mean? If your lid's stuck. Every time.
It does work for me.
It works every time.
That's
probably enough. There's no other way to do this, I'm afraid, folks. You just got to get your hands in. So, to the basic mayonnaise, you could add some creme fraiche, you could add some salad cream, you could add some wine vinegar, anything at all, not at all. In fact, you could skip the mayonnaise completely and just use a vinaigrette dressing. I guess they would very quite a lot in Germany in a classic potato salad. It's very much a vinaigrette as opposed to coleslaw, to cabbage, mayonnaise.
I've actually gone to the supermarket and had a bought one, a luxury one, coleslaw, and did that one instead of living in
Yes. I mean, we will occasionally sort of say, I haven't got time to make it, I'm starving, it's just like,
I know that just out there, the sweating.
I have to say, it's never, it always disappoints me, the shop board stuff. I think it's just so quick to make your own, for goodness sake. Excuse me.